Ever stop to think about something, well, as simple as sugar?
Sugar. Okay, where are we going with this?
Well, between 1750 and 1900, it basically went from this, luxury good to something millions could actually afford.
Ah, right. That kind of dramatic shift.
Exactly. And it wasn't random. It was driven by these huge changes in how people thought about economics, about trade.
Yeah, that period, 1750 to 1900, it saw this real battle of ideas, didn't it? Moving away from the old ways where governments controlled everything.
Mm-hmm. Towards something much more open, market-driven.
Precisely. A shift from state control to, well, something else entirely.
And that's really the heart of our deep dive today. We're pulling out the key bits from these economic developments and innovation sources, looking at how old ideas got replaced by new ones that honestly built the world we're in now.
It's like understanding the operating system behind modern business and trade.
Yeah, and understanding these historical shifts gives you such valuable context for today.
Absolutely. It helps make sense of global trade, why multinational companies are so powerful, all of that. It's the bedrock.
So let's get into it. Economic changes, 1750 to 1900. First up, we need to talk about the system they were moving away from, mercantilism.
Right, mercantilism, the dominant idea for quite a while there.
So what was the core thinking behind it?
At its heart, it was all about national power. Think of countries trying to grab as much gold and silver as possible.
Like a national treasure chest kind of idea.
Sort of, yeah. Governments were heavily involved, putting high taxes, tariffs on imports to protect their own industries
Okay.
and making sure they exported more than they imported. Colonies were crucial.
How so?
They were seen as sources of cheap raw materials and guaranteed markets for the home country's goods, all tightly controlled by the state.
Very hands-on then. So then along comes this radically different idea, free market economics.
Completely different philosophy. The big change was shifting power from the state to, well, the market itself, meaning individuals, buyers, and sellers making their own economic choices, with ideally very little government getting in the way.
And the big name associated with this, the sort of intellectual father, is Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations.
Absolutely. His book in 1776 was revolutionary, a massive critique of mercantilism.
What was his main beef with it?
He basically argued that all those government restrictions, they actually held back economic growth. And, they mostly benefited the elites and certain favored businesses, not really society overall.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What were his key arguments?
Well, he championed laissez-faire.
Right, the French term.
Yeah, basically let it be or leave it alone. The idea that government should, for the most part, keep its hands off the economy.
Why did he think that would work better?
He had this concept of the invisible hand.
Ah, yes, the famous invisible hand. Break that down for us.
Okay, so think about, say, a baker. The baker doesn't bake bread just out of the goodness of their heart, right? They want to earn a living.
Sure, self-interest.
Exactly. But to succeed, they need to make good bread that people actually want to buy at a fair price. So by pursuing their own self-interest, they end up providing something valuable to the community. That's the invisible hand. Individual ambition, guided by supply and demand in a free market, unintentionally leads to positive outcomes for everyone. Smith was pretty optimistic. He thought this would spread wealth more evenly.
So less government meddling actually means more prosperity for more people. That was the core idea.
That was the core argument, yes. More efficient, more wealth generated overall.
Did everyone just suddenly flip a switch and ditch mercantilism?
Oh, definitely not. It was slow, a gradual shift, really. Old habits die hard, especially when powerful interests are involved.
But things did start to change.
Yeah, especially after 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars ended. You start seeing some Western governments begin to lower those trade barriers, reduce regulations.
And what happened?
Well, interestingly, trade did increase, and wealth grew in many of those places, which, seemed to kind of prove Smith's point, didn't it?
It looked like validation. But surely not everyone was sold on this pure free market idea. There must have been critics.
Absolutely. I mean, while it generated wealth, it also created new problems. Think about the conditions for the working class in the new factories. It wasn't always pretty.
Right. So who were some of the key critics? I know Jeremy Bentham had some thoughts.
Yes, Bentham. He's interesting. He believed in liberty, but he felt the free market, left totally alone, wouldn't fix things like poverty or widespread suffering.
So he wasn't totally anti-market, but
But he argued that government did have a role. It needed to step in with laws, with legislation to actually improve conditions and, well, the overall well-being of society. The utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number.
so some government intervention was necessary in his view.
Exactly. To address the downsides. Then you had Friedrich List coming from a different perspective again.
List was more focused on nations competing, wasn't he?
Yes, very much so. He looked at Britain, already industrialized, and thought, hang on, this global free market thing, it just helps them dominate everyone else.
So he was skeptical of applying Smith's ideas universally.
Highly skeptical. He argued that countries trying to catch up, like the German states at the time, needed to protect their new industries for a while, temporary tariffs, to let them grow strong enough to compete.
And this wasn't just theory, right? His ideas led to the Zollverein.
Precisely. The Zollverein was a customs union. Basically, the German states agreed to drop tariffs between themselves, creating a larger internal market. But they kept tariffs on goods coming in from outside Germany. It was a direct application of List's strategy. Foster internal trade, protect infant industries from foreign, especially British, competition.
So more strategic, maybe nationalist approach to trade policy?
You could say that. But despite these critiques, from Bentham on social grounds and List on national development grounds,
The overall trend was still towards free market ideas.
it seems so, yes. By the later 19th century, free market economics, or at least principles inspired by it, had become the dominant system adopted by the big industrial nations.
And this economic shift, this move towards freer trade and market principles, it had other consequences too, right? Like the rise of massive companies.
Absolutely. It kind of created the perfect environment for them. Less regulation, global markets opening up. It fueled the growth of what we now call transnational corporations.
Okay, so let's define that. What is a transnational corporation in this context?
We're talking about companies that are based, headquartered in one country, but have major operations, factories, offices, resource extraction in lots of other countries too.
So not just exporting goods, but actually setting up shop globally.
Exactly. A physical operational presence across borders, driven by finding new markets, cheaper labor, raw materials, the whole logic of expansion in a competitive market.
Can you give us some examples from that era?
Sure. A classic one is the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC.
Still around today, obviously.
It's still a giant. It was founded back in 1865 in Hong Kong, which was British-controlled then. Its whole purpose, really, was to finance British trade and imperial projects across Asia.
So directly linked to empire building.
Very much so. And it grew rapidly, opening branches in Shanghai, Japan, other key places. Made a huge amount of money for its British owners and investors.
Okay, another example.
Unilever, another familiar name.
The soap and household goods company.
That's the one. It started as a British-Dutch merger. They made things like soap, which sounds mundane, but demand for cleanliness and hygiene was actually growing rapidly.
Right, industrial society and all that.
Yeah, so Unilever built factories all over the place to meet this demand, and significantly, they sourced a lot of their raw materials, like palm oil for soap, from colonial holdings.
Specifically places like West Africa and the Belgian Congo.
Exactly, which highlights that connection. Again, this corporate growth was often intertwined with colonial exploitation. It wasn't just about free markets in a vacuum.
That paints a really complex picture. Global expansion, new products, but also these deeper inequalities baked in.
It was definitely complex.
Now, funding these huge international businesses, that must have required some new financial tricks, right? You couldn't just go to your local bank manager?
Not for this scale, no. Financing global operations needed new tools. This is where you see stock markets becoming really important.
Okay, how does stock markets help?
Well, instead of relying on just one or two wealthy owners, companies could raise money by selling shares, stocks, tiny pieces of ownership to lots of different people.
Spreading the risk and the potential reward.
Precisely. These stocks were then bought and sold on organized exchanges, like the New York Stock Exchange, which was growing in importance. If the company did well, the stock price went up, and the shareholders profited. It was a way to mobilize huge amounts of capital.
And there was another key legal development too, wasn't there? Limited liability.
Ah, yes. Limited liability corporations, or LLCs. This was a huge deal.
Why was it so significant?
Before limited liability, if you invested in a business and it failed, You could lose everything, your house, your savings, everything. Creditors could come after your personal assets.
High risk.
Very high risk. Limited liability changed that. It meant that if you invested in an LLC, the most you could lose was the amount you actually invested in the company. Your personal wealth was protected.
So that must have encouraged a lot more people to invest, right? Especially in potentially risky new ventures.
Absolutely. It lowered the barrier to entry for investors and encouraged the kind of risk-taking needed to fund these big, ambitious, sometimes uncertain transnational enterprises.
Okay, so we've got this shift towards free markets, the rise of these giant transnational companies, and new financial tools like stock markets and limited liability making it all possible. What was the overall impact on the economies of these industrializing nations?
Well, putting it simply, massive economic growth. I mean, there were definitely bumps in the road, financial crises, downturns, things like that.
Sure, booms and busts.
Exactly. But the overall trajectory between, say, 1800 and 1900 for Western industrialized nations was sharply upwards. They were significantly wealthier by the end of the century.
And did that wealth trickle down? Did it actually change life for ordinary people beyond just cheaper sugar?
Yes, arguably the biggest impact was an overall rise in the standard of living for many people in those industrialized countries. More people had access to more goods.
How did that happen?
Well, part of it was the sheer wealth being generated, which led to the growth of a larger middle class, people who actually had disposable income to buy things.
Okay, so purchasing power increased for some.
And crucially, the things to buy became more plentiful and cheaper. Think about mass production.
Right, factories churning out goods.
Exactly. New manufacturing techniques, like assembly lines eventually, just made production way more efficient. So clothes, household items, tools, things that might have been luxuries before became much more affordable for more people.
Availability and affordability increased together.
Yes, and don't forget agriculture.
How did that fit in?
Mechanization hit the farms too. Things like mechanical reapers, tractors later on. It meant more food could be grown more efficiently and often a greater variety too.
Which impacts health and lifespan.
Absolutely. Better nutrition played a big part in people living longer in many of these societies. So overall, a picture of significant material progress for a large portion of the population in the industrialized West.
Okay, so let's sort of recap the journey we've taken in this deep dive. We started with mercantilism, the state-controlled system.
Then saw the rise of free market ideas, Adam Smith, the invisible hand, laissez-faire, though with important critiques from people like Bentham and List.
Right. And this shift helped create the conditions for transnational corporations, think HSBC, Unilever to grow, financed by new things like stock markets and limited liability.
Which all contributed to pretty substantial economic growth, a rising standard of living, more available goods, and even longer lifespans for many in the industrializing nations by 1900.
What's really striking is how much of our modern world you can see taking shape back then.
It really is the foundation, isn't it? Multinational corporations, global supply chains, stock market fluctuations, even the sheer variety of stuff you can buy in a store. The roots are right here in this period.
It definitely makes you think about how those forces set in motion over a century ago are still playing out today in ways we might not even realize.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. We've talked a lot about the economic growth and the rise in living standards for some, but what about the other side of the coin?
Meaning?
Well, think about the social costs that came with this industrial capitalist boom. What were conditions like for the factory workers? And what was the real impact of getting those raw materials, like the palm oil for Unilever soap, from colonial territories?
Yeah, that's crucial context. Progress for some often came at a significant cost for others.
Exactly. Something to consider, the complex, often unequal human story behind these big economic shifts.